In this video, I'll review AP Psychology Unit 4 in about 40 minutes. Occasionally throughout the video, I'll refer to the Unit 4 study guide and flashcards. You can grab these via the links in the description and pinned comment. The study guide is designed for you to fill out while watching this video, so you can thoroughly study this whole unit as fast as possible. Okay, let's dive in. Unit 4 covers social psychology and personality in 7 sections. Let's dive right into the first section, which is titled Attribution Theory and Person Perception. Unit 4.1 focuses on attribution, which is the process of explaining why someone acts a certain way. Generally, we don't just notice other people's behavior, we try to figure out what caused it. To understand attributions, we need to know about types of attribution, people's explanatory style, and attribution biases. 2 types of attribution are dispositional attributions and situational attributions. Let's start with dispositional. This is when we explain someone's behavior by pointing to who they are as a person. We assume their actions reflect personality traits, intelligence, or internal qualities. For example, if someone forgets your birthday, you might think they're careless or selfish. That's a dispositional attribution. You're blaming who they are, not what they're dealing with. Situational attributions are when we explain behavior by pointing to what's happening around the person. We assume their actions are caused by external events, not their personality. For example, if someone forgets your birthday, you might assume they've been stressed or overwhelmed. That's a situational attribution. You're blaming the situation, not the person. Now let's move on to explanatory style. Explanatory style refers to the way people usually explain the good and bad events in their lives. An optimistic explanatory style means someone tends to see good events as their own doing and bad events as temporary or caused by external things. A pessimistic explanatory style means someone tends to blame themselves for bad events and believe those problems will last a long time. This style can influence motivation, resilience, and mental health. Next, we need to look at attribution biases. These are predictable errors people make when explaining behavior. There are 3 main ones to know: the actor-observer bias, the fundamental attribution error, and the self-serving bias. Actor-observer bias happens when people explain their own actions by pointing to the situation, but explain other people's actions by pointing to their personality. For example, if you snap at someone, you might say it was because you were tired, but if they snap at you, you might say it's because they're rude. That second part, where humans tend to overuse dispositional attribution when explaining others' behaviors, is also known as the fundamental attribution error. Here's another example of the fundamental attribution error. If someone is quiet in class, you might assume they're unfriendly, even though they might just be nervous. Here's another concept that plays with the same set of assumptions. It's called self-serving bias. In this one, people tend to take credit for their successes and blame outside forces for their failures. For example, if you win a game, you might say it's because you're talented. But if you lose, you might blame the weather, the referee, or your equipment. Before finishing up Unit 4.1, we need to look at a few more beliefs and behaviors that influence how people see themselves and others. These are locus of control, the mere exposure effect, self-fulfilling prophecy, and social comparison. Locus of control refers to a person's belief about what causes the events in their life. There are 2 main types: internal locus of control and external locus of control. Internal locus of control is when someone believes that their actions and decisions shape what happens to them. A person with an internal locus might say, "I got an A because I studied hard," or "I can fix this problem by trying something different." This mindset often leads to greater motivation and responsibility. External locus of control is when someone believes that outside forces, like luck, fate, or other people, determine what happens. A person with an external locus might say, "I got lucky on that test," or "There's nothing I can do to change the situation." This mindset can sometimes reduce motivation or make people feel powerless. Mere exposure effect is the idea that people tend to like things more the more they are exposed to them. This happens without any logical reason. Just seeing or hearing something again and again can make it feel more familiar and likable. For example, a song you didn't like at first might grow on you after you've heard it a few times. The same can happen with logos, people, or even foods. Self-fulfilling prophecy is when a person's belief or expectation leads them to act in ways that make the belief come true. For example, if you think you're bad at math, you might not try very hard. As a result, you do poorly on tests, confirming your belief even though your behavior helped create that outcome. These patterns can happen in school, friendships, or even job settings. Social comparison is the process of judging yourself by comparing yourself to others. There are two main types: upward comparison and downward comparison. We'll also examine a related term called relative deprivation. Upward comparison happens when someone compares themselves to someone who seems better off, like someone with more money, more talent, or better grades. This can sometimes motivate people to improve, but it can also lead to feelings of jealousy or self-doubt. Downward comparison happens when someone compares themselves to someone who seems worse off. This can boost confidence and make someone feel better about their own situation. Relative deprivation is a feeling that can come from social comparison. It's when someone feels like they're missing out, not because they truly have too little, but because they think others have more. For example, someone might feel unhappy with their perfectly good phone just because their friend has the newest model. As you can see, this is a negative consequence of upward social comparison. Okay, that's it for Unit 4.1. Here is a list of terms that we've covered in this section. I've included all these words and simple definitions for each in the flashcard set, which is available through the link in the description. You should have completed the study guide for this section now. Check the answer key for this section before moving on. Now, let's move on to Unit 4.2. Unit 4.2 focuses on how attitudes are formed, why they sometimes change, and how certain beliefs and thought patterns shape how we view others. The key concepts include stereotypes, implicit attitudes, belief perseverance, and cognitive dissonance. Stereotypes are generalized beliefs or concepts about a group of people. They often form when we try to simplify complex social information and make quick judgments. While stereotypes can reduce mental effort by allowing us to make faster decisions, they are usually overly broad and inaccurate. Stereotypes can lead to biased thinking, and they are often the root of prejudice and discrimination. Once formed, stereotypes can shape how we perceive others and how we act toward them, often without us realizing it. Implicit attitudes are beliefs or evaluations that people hold without being fully aware of them. These attitudes can influence behavior even if a person consciously believes something different. 4 important examples of implicit bias are the just world phenomenon, outgroup homogeneity bias, in-group bias, and ethnocentrism. Just world phenomenon is the belief that people get what they deserve. This belief can lead to blaming victims for their misfortunes and assuming that good things only happen to good people. It reflects an implicit attitude that the world is fair, even when it isn't. Outgroup homogeneity bias is the tendency to see members of other groups as all the same, while seeing members of your own group as unique individuals. This bias can make people assume that everyone in a group they don't belong to shares the same beliefs, traits, or behaviors. In-group bias is the tendency to prefer and favor people from your own group. This supports stronger loyalty to your group. However, it can lead to issues such as discrimination during hiring processes. Ethnocentrism is a form of in-group bias. It is the belief that your own culture, group, or ethnicity is superior to others. This bias can lead you to negatively judge other cultures, customs, and traditions unthinkingly. Belief perseverance is when people continue to believe something even after they've been shown evidence that it's false. Even strong evidence may not be enough to change the belief. People experiencing belief perseverance may engage in confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the tendency to search for and pay attention to information that supports what we already believe, while ignoring or rejecting information that goes against it. This bias helps keep belief perseverance alive by filtering out anything that might challenge our current view. Cognitive dissonance is the uncomfortable feeling you get when you believe one thing but do something that doesn't match that belief. For example, if someone sees themselves as honest but tells a lie, they may feel stress or tension. To reduce that discomfort, they may change their behavior, adjust their beliefs, or justify their actions in a way that makes them feel more consistent. Okay, that's it for Unit 4.2. Here is the list of terms that we've covered in this section. I've included all these words and simple definitions for each in the flashcard set, which is available through the link in the description. At this point, you should have completed the study guide for this section. Check the answer key before moving on. Now, let's move on to Unit 4.3, titled Psychology of Social Situations. Unit 4.3 explores the psychology of social situations. The main ideas from this unit are listed on the screen now, which we'll go through one by one. I've included terms that are explicitly mentioned in the AP Psychology curriculum, so you may be assessed on any one of these terms and concepts. First, we have social norms. These are the unwritten rules that guide how people behave in different situations. These expectations tell us what is considered normal, acceptable, or polite in a particular setting or culture. For example, shaking hands when you meet someone, or standing in line instead of cutting ahead, are behaviors driven by social norms. They help people get along and make social life more predictable. People often follow these norms automatically, but breaking them can lead to social disapproval or even punishment. Next is social influence theory, which explains how people's thoughts and actions are shaped by the presence and behavior of others. In other words, how do people consciously and subconsciously change their behavior when other people are around them? There are two main types of social influence: normative social influence and informational social influence. Normative social influence happens when people conform because they want to be liked or accepted. In this case, the goal is to fit in. Even if someone privately disagrees with the group, they may go along with it to avoid conflict or embarrassment. A common example is peer pressure, where someone may adopt a group's behavior to be part of the crowd. Informational social influence happens when people conform because they believe others know more than they do. This type of influence is based on the desire to be correct. For example, if you're unsure how to behave at a formal dinner, you might watch what others do and copy their behavior. Our next term is elaboration likelihood model. The elaboration likelihood model explains how people are persuaded by messages. It identifies two routes of persuasion: the central route and the peripheral route. Central route to persuasion happens when people carefully consider the arguments in a message. This type of persuasion relies on logic, evidence, and critical thinking. It's more likely to occur when the topic is personally relevant and the person is motivated to think deeply. For example, someone deciding which college to attend might compare tuition costs, graduation rates, and job placement data. Peripheral route to persuasion happens when people are influenced by superficial cues, rather than the actual content of the message. This includes things like the speaker's attractiveness, confidence, or popularity. One example is the halo effect, which is the tendency to assume that someone who is good-looking or charming must also be intelligent or trustworthy. Advertisements often rely on this route by using celebrities or flashy visuals to persuade without giving much information. Next up, we have two techniques used to increase the chances that someone will say yes to a request. They are called the foot in the door technique and the door in the face technique. The foot in the door technique involves starting with a small request that most people will agree to. After they say yes, a larger request is made. People are more likely to agree to the bigger favor because saying yes to the first request makes them feel committed. For example, someone might ask you to sign a petition first, then later ask you to donate money. The door in the face technique starts with a large request that is likely to be rejected. After the person says no, a much smaller request is made. Because the second request feels like a compromise, people are more likely to agree to it. For example, if someone asks you for $100 and you say no, you might feel more comfortable giving $10 when they ask next. Next up, we have the terms conformity and obedience. Conformity is when people change their behavior to match group norms. This can be subtle, like laughing at a joke you don't find funny because everyone else is, or more serious, like going along with harmful behavior because no one else speaks up. Research shows that people are more likely to conform when the group is unanimous, when the group has high status, or when the individual feels insecure. Obedience is when someone follows direct instructions from an authority figure. This can be helpful, like following a doctor's advice, or harmful, like obeying unethical orders. Classic studies like Stanley Milgram's shock experiment showed that ordinary people can follow orders even when they believe those orders cause harm, especially when the authority figure is nearby, appears legitimate, and takes responsibility for the outcome. Next up, we have cultural values. AP Psychology requires you know how culture can influence how you perceive and behave towards yourself and others. For this, you need to understand three important concepts: individualism, collectivism, and multiculturalism. Individualism is a cultural value that emphasizes personal goals, independence, and self-expression. People in individualist cultures often see themselves as separate from others and are encouraged to stand out, compete, and make their own choices. Collectivism emphasizes group goals, loyalty, and social harmony. People in collectivist cultures tend to see themselves as part of a group, such as a family or community, and they often prioritize group needs over personal desires. Multiculturalism is the belief that different cultural backgrounds should be recognized and valued within a society. It encourages people to maintain their cultural identity while also participating in a shared national or social culture. Multiculturalism promotes tolerance, inclusion, and respect for diversity. Our next term is group membership. Being in a group changes how people behave. Some effects are positive, like increased confidence or teamwork, while others can lead to poor decisions or risky behavior. For this section, AP Psychology requires you know about the following terms: group polarization, groupthink, diffusion of responsibility, social loafing, and de-individuation. Group polarization happens when people in a group discussion move toward more extreme positions than they held at the start. Talking with like-minded individuals can create an echo chamber. This strengthens and exacerbates initial opinions, without any pushback or counterpoints being presented for balance. Groupthink is when the desire for group agreement becomes so strong that people avoid disagreement or critical thinking. This can lead to bad decisions because no one speaks up against flawed ideas. It often happens in groups that are very cohesive, have strong leaders, or are under pressure to make quick decisions. Diffusion of responsibility occurs when individuals in a group feel less responsible for taking action. They assume someone else will handle the problem. Social loafing is when people put in less effort on group tasks than they would if they were doing the tasks alone. This often happens when individual effort can't be easily tracked. You might have experienced this in school group work where some people in the group ride the coattails of the one or two people doing the hard work. De-individuation is when people in groups lose their sense of personal identity and self-control. This can lead to impulsive, aggressive, or destructive behavior. It often happens in crowds or during protests when people feel anonymous and less accountable. Next up, we have the concept of social facilitation. This is the effect of an audience on task performance. This hypothesis argues that the presence of others increases arousal, which helps on easy tasks but hurts performance on harder ones. Let's break that down. Essentially, when people are doing something simple or familiar, having others around usually helps them do better. For example, a student who has practiced a speech many times may perform even better when presenting in front of a class. However, when someone is doing something difficult or new, an audience can actually make performance worse. For example, someone trying to solve a complex math problem might freeze up when others are watching. Our next key term is the false consensus effect. This is the tendency to overestimate how much other people agree with us. When people hold a belief, they often assume that it's more common than it really is. For example, someone who strongly supports a particular political issue may assume that most people agree with them. In reality, the broader population might be much more divided. This bias can create a false sense of confidence. Next up, we have the concept of superordinate goals. Superordinate goals are shared goals that require cooperation between groups. These goals can help reduce tension, prejudice, and rivalry. When two competing groups must work together to succeed, they often begin to see each other more positively due to their shared superordinate goals. However, even when groups have superordinate goals, short-term interest can take over. This is called the social trap. Here's an example. We all have the superordinate goal of reducing pollution in the environment. But some groups might decide it's in their short-term interest to pollute more in order to make money. This benefits the group in the short term, but harms everyone in the long term. That's the social trap at work. Next up, we have industrial organizational psychology. This is the study of how people behave at work. This field of psychology is all about finding ways to make jobs better for both the workers and the company. It brings together the research on how people act in groups and applies it to make work better for everyone. Here are two key findings from industrial organizational psychology. First, it finds that happy workers are more productive. When people feel good about their jobs, like when they're treated fairly and know what's expected, they usually try harder and get more done. Second, it shows that good bosses make a big difference. Bosses who listen, give clear instructions, and treat people with respect help their team stay motivated and work better together. So basically, industrial organizational psychology helps companies figure out how to make work a better place for everyone. Our second last term is altruism. This refers to helping others without expecting anything in return. True altruism is considered selfless, but researchers have found that people often help for complex reasons, meaning pure altruism isn't as common as you might think. Two interesting explanations for altruism are the social reciprocity norm and the social responsibility norm. The social reciprocity norm is the expectation that favors or kindness should be returned. If someone helps you, you're expected to help them back. Essentially, you've incurred social debt that needs to be repaid. For example, if a classmate lends you their notes when you miss school, you might feel obligated to return the favor in the future. The social responsibility norm is the belief that people should help others who depend on them or who can't help themselves. For example, adults are expected to care for children, and many people feel a duty to help strangers who are in obvious need, like someone who has fallen on the sidewalk. This norm is especially strong when the person in need is not responsible for their situation. Lastly, we have the bystander effect. The bystander effect is when people are less likely to help someone in need if there are other people around, because everyone assumes someone else will do it. Two factors predict whether someone is likely to help: situational variables and attentional variables. Situational variables are things about the situation that can change how likely someone is to help. For example, the more people who are around, the less likely each person is to help, because they think someone else will. If the situation clearly looks like an emergency or the person in trouble seems helpless, people are more likely to step in. Attentional variables are about whether someone is paying attention. If a person is in a rush or distracted, they might not even notice what's happening. But if they are focused and realize no one else is helping, they're more likely to act. Okay, that was a lot, so make sure you complete the study guide for this section and check the answer key before moving on. It might take some time to memorize all these terms, so I've added all of them to the flashcard set that you can get through the link in the description. When you're ready, we'll move on to Unit 4.4, titled Psychodynamic and Humanistic Theories of Personality. This unit looks at two different ways psychologists understand personality: the psychodynamic theory and the humanistic theory. Let's start with the psychodynamic theory. The psychodynamic theory explains personality as being shaped by unconscious thoughts, memories, and desires, especially those formed in early childhood. According to this view, we are often unaware of the true reasons for our behavior because they are buried deep in the unconscious mind. You may recognize the founder of this theory, Sigmund Freud. Two important ideas in the psychodynamic perspective are ego defense mechanisms and projective tests. Ego defense mechanisms are automatic mental responses that protect a person from feelings of stress, conflict, or emotional pain. They help reduce anxiety by keeping difficult thoughts or feelings out of conscious awareness. Examples include denial, displacement, projection, rationalization, reaction formation, regression, repression, and sublimation. Denial is refusing to accept a painful or threatening reality. A person in denial may insist they are fine after a breakup, even though they're deeply upset. Displacement is redirecting strong emotions from the original source to a safer target. For example, someone angry at their boss might come home and yell at a sibling instead. Projection is when a person attributes their own unacceptable thoughts or feelings to someone else. If someone feels jealous, they might accuse others of being jealous of them. Rationalization is creating logical-sounding excuses to avoid facing uncomfortable truths. A student who cheats on a test might say, "Everyone does it, so it's not a big deal." Reaction formation is behaving in a way that is the opposite of what one actually feels. A person who feels insecure might act overly confident and arrogant to hide their self-doubt. Regression is reverting to behaviors from an earlier stage of development. A stressed teenager might start whining or throwing tantrums like a young child. Repression is the unconscious blocking of painful memories or thoughts. For example, a person who experienced a traumatic event might have no memory of it later in life. Sublimation is redirecting unacceptable impulses into socially acceptable or productive actions. A person with aggressive urges might take up boxing or competitive sports. Now let's look at projective tests. These are tests used by psychodynamic psychologists to explore hidden thoughts, emotions, and conflicts. These tests present vague images or prompts and ask the person to describe what they see or what comes to mind. The idea is that people will project their unconscious thoughts into their answers, revealing feelings they may not be aware of. Common examples include the Rorschach ink blot test, where people describe what they see in abstract ink blots, and the thematic apperception test, where people create stories about pictures of social scenes. Now let's pivot to the humanistic theory. While the psychodynamic theory spends a lot of time looking at our subconscious, humanistic psychology focuses on conscious experiences, free will, and the drive for personal growth. This perspective sees people as naturally good and capable of reaching their full potential if they are given the right environment. Two central ideas in this theory are unconditional positive regard and the self-actualizing tendency. Let's start with unconditional positive regard. Unconditional positive regard means being fully accepted and loved without any conditions. When people feel valued no matter what they do or say, they are more likely to develop a healthy and confident sense of self. For example, like a parent who tells their child, "I love you no matter what grade you get," is showing unconditional positive regard. This kind of support helps the child feel safe to be honest, take risks, and grow. Now let's look at the self-actualizing tendency. The self-actualizing tendency is the inner drive people have to become the best version of themselves. It involves developing personal talents, pursuing meaningful goals, and living in a way that feels true to who they are. For example, an artist who dedicates their life to expressing themselves through painting, even if it's not financially rewarding, is following their self-actualizing tendency. According to humanistic theorists, this pursuit of authenticity and growth is the most important motivation in life. Okay, that's it for Unit 4.4. Here's the list of key terms from this section. I've added them all to the flashcard set that you can grab through the link in the description. At this point, you should also have completed the study guide for this section. Check the answer key before moving on. Now, let's move on to Unit 4.5. This unit looks at two major perspectives in personality psychology: the social cognitive theory of personality and trait theories of personality. Social cognitive theory explains personality as the result of a continuous interaction between three forces: personal factors, behavior, and environment. This three-part model is called reciprocal determinism, and it's often shown as a triangle. One point of the triangle is your personal factors. This includes your thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and biological traits. The second point is behavior, or the actions you choose to take. The third point is the environment, meaning the social and physical situations around you. According to this theory, all 3 points influence each other in a constant loop. The theory places 3 additional terms in the personal factors corner of the triangle: self-concept, self-efficacy, and self-esteem. Self-concept refers to how you view yourself, your identity, roles, values, and sense of who you are in the world. But self-concept isn't created in isolation. It's shaped by your behavior and by how the environment responds to you. For example, if you believe you're bad at public speaking, that's your self-concept. You might avoid speaking in class, that's your behavior, which causes teachers and classmates to overlook you. That's your environment. That social feedback reinforces your belief that you're bad at public speaking, and the cycle continues. The opposite can happen too. If you believe you're a good problem solver, your self-concept, you might offer ideas in group discussions, your behavior, and your classmates might look to you for input while your teacher gives you positive feedback. That's your environment. That support strengthens your confidence and shapes your future choices. In both examples, your self-concept is not just something you have, It's something that changes and evolves through reciprocal interactions. Self-efficacy is also part of the personal factors corner. It refers to your belief in your ability to handle a specific task or challenge. When you have high self-efficacy, you're more likely to try new things and push through difficulty. Those experiences then shape how others respond to you and how you see yourself in the future. Self-esteem is another part of personal factors. It refers to your overall sense of self-worth, how much you like and value yourself. Like self-efficacy and self-concept, it both influences your behavior and is shaped by how people treat you in different situations. So, to sum it all up, your self-beliefs affect your behavior and influence how others interact with you. In turn, you see how others are interacting with you, which will feed back into your self-beliefs. Positive self-beliefs tend to have a positive feedback loop, while negative self-beliefs tend to have a negative feedback loop. Now let's look at trait theories. Trait theories of personality focus on identifying the core characteristics that define who you are. According to this view, your personality is made up of traits that you have from birth and that follow you throughout your life, and in all situations. For example, someone who is highly anxious will likely react with nervousness in many types of situations, not just one. One of the most widely accepted trait theories is the Big Five theory of personality. This theory suggests that personality is made up of 5 broad traits that exist in all people. Each trait exists on a continuum from low to high, and most people fall somewhere in the middle rather than at the extremes. The traits are agreeableness, openness to experience, extroversion, conscientiousness, and emotional stability. Agreeableness reflects how kind, cooperative, and empathetic someone is. People who score high in agreeableness are typically warm, trustworthy, and helpful. They value getting along with others. People who score lower may be more competitive, skeptical, or blunt in their communication. Openness to experience is about imagination, curiosity, and a willingness to try new things. People who score high in openness tend to enjoy art, unusual ideas, and exploring new experiences. They're creative, curious, and often open-minded. People who score lower in openness prefer routine, structure, and familiar ways of doing things. Extroversion is about how outgoing and energetic someone is in social situations. People high in extroversion tend to enjoy being around others, talk easily, and feel energized by social interaction. Those low in extroversion, often called introverts, may prefer quiet time alone and feel drained by too much social activity. Conscientiousness refers to how organized, dependable, and disciplined someone is. People high in conscientiousness are careful, responsible, and good at planning ahead. They tend to meet deadlines and follow through on commitments. Those low in conscientiousness may be more spontaneous or careless, and might struggle with staying organized or completing tasks. Emotional stability, sometimes described in reverse as neuroticism, refers to how well someone handles stress and emotional ups and downs. People who are emotionally stable tend to stay calm, resilient, and relaxed, even in difficult situations. Those lower in emotional stability are more likely to feel anxious, moody, or overwhelmed by stress. The Big Five personality traits are measured using surveys called personality inventories. These surveys ask people to rate how true certain statements are for them, like, "I enjoy being around people," or "I get upset easily." Scientists look at the answers and use a method called factor analysis to find patterns. These patterns help show the 5 main parts of someone's personality. Okay, that's it for Unit 4.5. At this point, you should have completed the study guide for this section. Check the answer key before moving on. I've also added all the keywords for this unit into the flashcard set that you can grab through the link in the description. Now, let's move on to Unit 4.6, titled Motivation. Unit 4.6 focuses on different theories that explain what motivates us to take action. The AP Psychology curriculum asks us to explore the 8 perspectives on the screen now. Let's start from the top. Drive reduction theory explains motivation as the body's attempt to reduce an uncomfortable physiological sensation. Here's how it works. When we experience a physical need or discomfort, like hunger, thirst, or tiredness, we feel motivated or driven to take action to reduce the discomfort. For example, when you're hungry, you feel driven to find food. Once you eat, the drive is reduced, balance is restored, and you're no longer motivated. So, according to this theory, motivation is strongest when we are trying to correct a physical imbalance. Next is arousal theory. This theory suggests that people are motivated not just by physical needs, but also by the desire to maintain an optimal level of mental alertness or stimulation. Some people prefer high levels of arousal and seek out new or intense experiences, while others prefer calm and quiet environments. When arousal is too low, people may feel bored and seek stimulation. When arousal is too high, they may try to calm themselves. Arousal theory is demonstrated by the Yerkes-Dodson law. This law explains the relationship between arousal and performance. It states that performance improves with arousal, but only up to a certain point. After that point, too much arousal causes performance to decline. The law finds that simple tasks are usually performed best under high arousal, while complex tasks require a lower level of arousal for best performance. Next, we have self-determination theory. The theory says that people are most motivated when three basic psychological needs are met: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Autonomy is the feeling that you are in control of your own choices. When people feel forced to do something, motivation drops. But when they feel like they chose the task themselves, they're more engaged. Competence is the feeling of being good at something. People want to feel like they're making progress and mastering skills. Success builds confidence and motivation. Relatedness is the need to feel connected to others. When people feel supported, accepted, and valued by others, they're more motivated to keep going. The theory also introduces two additional influential frameworks for motivation: intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation comes from within. It refers to doing something because it's enjoyable, interesting, or personally meaningful. For example, someone might paint because they love the creative process, not because they are being rewarded or recognized. Extrinsic motivation comes from outside the individual. It refers to doing something to earn a reward or avoid punishment. For example, someone might not like studying, but they do it to earn a 5 on their AP Psychology exam. Or they don't like to work extra hours, but they want to receive a bonus. Incentive theory builds on self-determination theory's concept of extrinsic motivation. It focuses on how external rewards influence motivation. According to this theory, people are motivated to act in ways that will lead to rewards, such as money, praise, or recognition. Unlike drive reduction theory, incentive theory says that you don't have to experience physical need or discomfort to feel motivated. The mere presence of a desirable reward can create motivation. For example, a student might be motivated to participate more in class if the teacher gives extra credit for doing so. Next up, we'll look at the role of instincts in motivating action. Instincts are natural behaviors or reactions that animals are born with and do not have to learn. For example, birds know how to build nests without being taught. In other words, birds are inherently motivated to build a nest. These behaviors are present at birth and usually follow a predictable sequence. In humans, however, there is little evidence of strong instinctual behavior. Most human actions are instead shaped by learning, culture, and individual experience. Next up is Lewin's motivational conflicts theory. According to this theory, motivation often comes from needing to resolve one of three types of conflict: approach-approach conflict, approach-avoidance conflict, and avoidance-avoidance conflict. Approach-approach conflict occurs when a person must choose between two appealing options. For example, deciding between two favorite restaurants for dinner can be stressful because both choices are positive. People usually resolve this kind of conflict by choosing one or the other, and once the decision is made, they often feel satisfied. There's not a lot of regret here because both choices are good. Approach avoidance conflict happens when a single choice has both positive and negative aspects. For example, someone may want to audition for a school play because they love acting, but also fear public speaking. This creates mixed feelings and tension. To resolve this conflict, people often delay the decision or go back and forth. For example, that student who wants to audition for a play but fears embarrassment might try practicing with a friend first to reduce anxiety. Avoidance-avoidance conflict is when someone must choose between two negative options. For example, Deciding between studying for your psychology exam or your human geography exam may feel like choosing between two painful activities. For this type of conflict, people often delay action as long as possible, hoping one of the choices disappears or becomes more tolerable. For example, a student might avoid study for either subject until the night before the exam, when the pressure pushes them to pick one. If you're following along using the study guide, pause the screen now so you can fill out the table about motivational conflicts theory with the correct answers. Next up, we have sensation-seeking theory. This theory explains motivation in terms of a person's need for new and stimulating experiences. Here are 4 types of sensation-seeking: experience-seeking, thrill or adventure-seeking, disinhibition, and boredom susceptibility. Experience-seeking involves a desire for new ideas, artistic experiences, and unfamiliar situations. People high in this trait enjoy traveling to new places or exploring different cultures. Thrill or adventure-seeking is the pursuit of physical excitement. This includes activities like skydiving, mountain biking, or roller coaster riding. Disinhibition is the tendency to seek out experiences that break social rules or involve letting go of control. This might include partying, impulsive decision-making, or taking social risks. Boredom susceptibility is a dislike for routine and repetition. People high in this trait get restless quickly and may constantly look for something new to do. Lastly, we have to discuss the role of food for motivating action. Food demonstrates how motivation results from the interaction between physical processes and external factors. Let's look at the physical aspect first. Physically, hormones such as ghrelin and leptin control our hunger. Ghrelin signals the feeling of hunger and is released when the stomach is empty. Leptin signals fullness and is released when the body has had enough food. These hormones are regulated by the hypothalamus, which monitors the body's internal state through its communication with the pituitary gland. Now let's consider external factors. People are more likely to eat when food is present, even if they aren't physically hungry. Meal timing, social settings, and cultural habits, like eating cake at a birthday party, can also motivate eating. These external factors demonstrate that eating also occurs due to habit and social expectations, not just need. Okay, so that's everything you need to know about theories of motivation. I've added all the keywords for all these theories into the flashcard set that you can grab through the link in the description. At this point, you should have completed the study guide for this section. Check the answer key before moving on. Now, let's move on to Unit 4.7, titled Emotion. We're going to start this section with a definition of emotion, which we'll then have to break down in order to truly comprehend it. Here's the definition. Emotion is a psychological response to internal or external events that involves a combination of physiological and cognitive factors. 2 important terms in that definition are cognitive and physiological. Cognitive experiences of emotion are about how we interpret or think about what's happening. This includes things like giving the emotion a name. For example, I feel angry. Thinking about what caused the emotion. For example, that person insulted me. And making judgments. For example, this is unfair. On the other hand, physiological experiences of emotion are the body's automatic responses, like a racing heart, sweating, blushing, and muscle tension. These happen without thinking. They're controlled by your nervous system. It's clear that emotions involve both physiological and cognitive factors, but it's not entirely clear which comes first, the physiological or cognitive factor. Some early 20th century theories suggested that emotions happen in a sequence. First a physiological response, then a mental interpretation. Others argued that these 2 aspects happen at the same time, or that the cognitive label comes first and is necessary for the emotion to be fully experienced. One hypothesis that attempts to settle this debate is the facial feedback hypothesis. It proposes that our facial expressions can actually influence how we feel. For example, smiling might make someone feel happier, even if the smile is forced. So, the facial feedback hypothesis supports the idea that physical reactions might occur before our cognitive awareness. However, research on this hypothesis has produced mixed results, and there is no single explanation that fully accounts for how emotions are generated. One more recent idea in the field is the broaden and build theory of emotion, which focuses on the effects of positive and negative emotions. Positive emotions are thought to expand our awareness and encourage creative thinking, problem solving, and new behaviors. In contrast, negative emotions tend to narrow our focus and limit our range of thoughts and actions, which can be helpful in short-term survival situations, but limiting in other contexts. Lastly, we need to look at how emotions are experienced across cultures. For this, we'll look at the universality of emotions and two concepts called display rules and elicitors. First, it appears there are some emotions that are universal across all cultures. These may include anger, disgust, sadness, happiness, surprise, and fear. This universality suggests a possible biological basis for some emotions in all humans. Still, the research is mixed, and not all studies agree. What is more clearly established is that display rules, the rules for how and when emotions can be shown, and elicitors, the events that trigger emotions, vary across cultures. For example, one culture might encourage open expression of emotion, while another may expect emotional restraint. Display rules can also vary across genders, age groups, and socioeconomic status. For example, some cultures expect men to be less emotionally expressive than women, as shown by the phrase, "men don't cry." So you've now got all the key information you need for Unit 4, but you'll need to have the ability to apply it in the exam. So here's what you need to do next. Grab the study guide in the video description to reinforce your knowledge of the information. Become a premium member to get an edge on your studies. You'll get in-depth tutorials and video walkthroughs of common Unit 4 questions you could face in the AP exam, and advanced study guides to help you ace the exam. And once you feel confident about Unit 4, click the video on screen now to watch my full AP Psychology Unit 5 review.